Welcome, everyone, to the Culinary Now podcast. My name is Matt Britt.
And I'm Jamie Schick.
And today on the pod, we are joined by Max Manning. Max is a newer faculty member here at Johnson & Wales, but Max also is a graduate. He is a professional chef with years of industry experience, mostly working in clubs, like golf clubs, yacht clubs, so that market segment, if you will. But then Max, took a little break a few years ago, decided he wanted to go back, get into education. He was a teaching assistant at Johnson & Wales. He got his master's degree at Johnson & Wales. And then we grabbed him and we got you now, Max. You are now officially a faculty member here at Johnson & Wales. And welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're definitely excited to learn more about you. And I think that Matt did a great job of giving us like a quick overview. Can you go into a little bit more detail and maybe talk specifically about what interested you in education and wanting to pursue this field to begin with?
Yeah, definitely. So, as Matt mentioned, I got my start in the industry. I've worked in a lot of golf clubs, yacht clubs. I've worked in some dining service programs, independent restaurants. I attended Johnson& Wales a long time ago, got my undergrad in culinary, and in a few years ago, I wanted to make a shift. And I'd always been interested in education. I was starting to get kind of burnt out in the industry, but knew I wanted to stay with culinary arts. And that's when I just decided that I really wanted to get into teaching. So at that same time, there was an adjunct teaching opportunity at Johnson& Wales, which I jumped on, which is how I began to get my feet wet into teaching. I taught a single class, really loved it, stumbled my way through. I would probably cringe if I saw some of the things I did, but began to get the teaching bug, and that's when I decided I was gonna enroll in the MAT program and really just jump into learning to be a teacher.
So that's so interesting. And you use like the phrase jump into being a teacher. I feel like that's a feeling a lot of chefs who make the switch from industry, which we've all done, into education have to do. Now, you could use anecdotes like every chef is a teacher. And of course, every chef does teach their crew how to do certain things. But I wonder how you feel about this. Is there a difference between teaching a line cook how to cook a dish and teaching 18 to 20 students how to think about food in an inspiring way?
Yeah, no, there's a definite difference. So I think I came in with a mentality that most every chef has, which I was training people. And my expectations of the students were employee driven. And I would be frustrated and probably not take as much time at first with students as you would when you educate them. And as I learned, there's a huge difference between training an employee and teaching a student, and the amount of practice and feedback that you give a student and the amount of patience you have essentially when you're trying to educate versus when you're trying to train. Um, I learned in my experiences so far that I think I'm just so much more patient now. And I think my expectations aren't lower, but they're different. I think what I look to gain out of a student learning a skill or a technique and how I measure that is considerably different than how I would in the industry.
I think everything you said is super relatable, and especially like stumbling through your first class. I remember going through that myself, but I came yeah, right. I came from the industry with no teaching experience and I didn't have a
Yeah.
teaching degree. And I know you mentioned you went through our MAT program here at Johnson and Wales, and I'm curious if you felt like that helped to prepare you for teaching or gave you some tools to use and implement as you're starting your teaching career, or if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the MAT program like made me a teacher, or at least made me a starting teacher. When I go back to that adjunct class, I just remember like I'll never forget I had one student ask to make barbecue sauce and I'm like, no. I'm like, absolutely not. I'm like, not in the curriculum, not today. And in hindsight, it's like, why? Like, why not? Like, why is that such a problem? Um, so the MAT program gave me just so many basics. It gave me basics about how people learn, how to teach. It gave me the opportunity to emulate other teachers. It gave me the opportunity to practice the things I'd been learning. It's a very safe environment to make mistakes. The first, like many, many times you have the opportunity to teach or give a lecture, you're terrified. You're trying to remember all these things you're supposed to be doing as a teacher, and you're trying to remember to do them all simultaneously. And you're like freezing, and you're nervous, and you're awkward. And you just have so many opportunities to put like the technical knowledge into play and make mistakes, and it's okay. And if you don't hit every single bullet point on the lesson plan, like, it's gonna be all right. There's time to make it up. I learned to write lesson plans. I learned about curriculum, all things I didn't know much about. I mean, obviously, I'd experienced them all through school. I went to public school, and then I went to Johnson Wales. So, of course, I've been a part of classes, but I had no idea how much work and thought and planning and organization went into creating like just one day of a student's experience. And I wouldn't have known any of that without the MAT program. When I was I keep going back to my adjunct experience, but I was given a class and I knew nothing. And I would come in and I would shadow one of the instructors at Johnson Wales who was teaching the same class, and I would mimic them to a T. Like, I would try to copy everything they did. I had the teacher I was shadowing was kind of an old school teacher, and they would lecture for like 2 hours straight every single day. So I, in turn, would talk for 2 hours every single day. And come to find out, as everyone does, it's really hard to sit and listen to somebody talk for 2 hours, especially if it's early in the morning, or if you're, a student and maybe you stayed up too late or whatever. And with the MAT program, you're given all these tools, and you're also encouraged and basically taught that, like, you have to develop your own style as well. Like, when I was an adjunct and I was mimicking that instructor, I was like parking who I was, and I was trying to be that person. And at the end of the day, like, you're not someone else. You're yourself, and you have to bring your own personality to teaching. And I think there was a big takeaway. The MAT program is it gave me the opportunity to learn those fundamental skills and like thought behind teaching, but also to be Max and bring that into the classroom. It was massively helpful, and I think had I been hired as a teacher without that experience, I'd be a lot farther behind than where I am now. Still very new, still very green, still learning, but at least I have an idea of the game plan. Without MAT, I think I'd be making a lot more mistakes along the way, and I think I'd be a lot more frustrated.
So, Max, on that note, I got to do it. A lot more mistakes along the way. You know what would be a huge mistake for me today? Not
I can't
taking
imagine.
not taking my magic mind to stay focused during this podcast. So, Jamie and I, we're going to shoot one right now. We're taking the focus shot straight from Magic Mind.
Yeah, this is going to help us with our mental performance.
I need it. I need it. Trust me.
Mm-hmm.
So, Jamie, this helps me with my mental wealth, and I know you are you might as well have a master's degree in mental wealth. So, tell us about it.
Mental wealth is about investing in your habits today that can build your resilience for future challenges. And Magic Mind helps you do that. It's subtly sweet. It gives you a sharper mind. It lowers your stress. It gives you nice, calm energy. All things we're looking for when we're managing a chaotic classroom.
Thanks, Magic Mind. I know you guys sent us these products. They're fantastic. We love to have you as a partner here on the pod. And if you're interested in sharpening your own mental wealth, check them out. We got a great deal with them. Jamie, what is it?
That For the first time, they're bundling their focus and their sleep shots at 45% off when you go to magicmind.com/CNPODJAN.
So, Max, I want to get back into it a little bit because you mentioned the word, the important word for me, and I know this is something that we share a connection on because of our involvement in this over time, is sort of the curriculum. You mentioned, not having to get to everything on the lesson plan. You mentioned, measuring like sort of like outcomes and student success. How, like, what is your view today on sort of culinary curriculum and implementation versus when you were perhaps like a teaching assistant? Because that's part of the MAT program is you have to do student teaching. So you get you dip your toe in the water a little bit there, but like, how has that understanding evolved in the last, let's say, 2 years?
I think the understanding has evolved as I have a bigger idea of the overall picture, like the plan, like what were the objectives. So when you're in MAT, it's more sectioned off. So I was more focused on like crushing a lecture. So I might put a lot of time and effort, like singularly into that and making sure I know the material I'm going to speak on and maybe like and making sure I'm using the best body language I can and just making sure I'm actually reaching students while I'm speaking to them and reading the room and maybe not rushing through things or maybe speeding things up. Your bird's eye view is smaller when I think you're a teaching assistant, whereas when you're actually full blown in charge of your classroom, there's a much bigger picture to focus on. Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, I'm almost more comfortable now as a teacher than when I was as a teaching assistant. I think you're nervous and you're so green and you're just trying to do everything right. And you don't have as much you don't have as much experience, so there's not as much so much to pull off. Like cooking, I've been cooking for like 25 years. So I'm certainly no master chef. I'm never going to stop learning, but I'm a lot more comfortable just working in a kitchen or leading a kitchen. Whereas when you're learning to teach, it's brand new. I mean, like we touched on before, when you're leading a kitchen and you're training your employees, like yes, you're teaching, but it's a different game. I think being in charge of your own classroom and getting the experience, just it's doing it. The more you get to do
Mm.
it, the more comfortable you feel, and some of that pressure starts to come off. I think when you're in that MAT program, you're so nervous about getting everything perfect, and as get into actually teaching every day, it's not perfect, and you want it to be, and you try and you do your best, but you become more comfortable with the idea that it's not going to be this absolutely flawless thing.
So, Max, as you know, and for full disclosure for those listening, I teach in the MAT program, so like I'm a little biased, but this is super timely because every time at this point in the year, because I teach a course on curriculum, we're talking about, basically exactly what you mentioned, that bird's eye view, how to, kind of navigate the mess, or like, in a kitchen, you would say you're in the weeds, right? So for curriculum, I like that analogy. Like you're always in the perpetual curriculum weeds. I think that challenges a ton of graduate students who are, again, they don't have necessarily the ton of experience teaching. Maybe they've never taught before. They're, a seasoned chef. They're going through this program where they're being told this is what you do. And like, you can't fault people because they think, okay, someone tells me what to do. That's the way I'm going to do it. But I think you would say, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, there is not one way to do anything in education. And I wonder what your opinion is on this, but like how do you approach the idea that curriculum, it's a very specific thing, but it's also like completely out there and almost the Wild West, and anything really goes so long as it's focused around, students. I mean, that's a very broad picture, but like, what is your comment on that?
When you're in the MAT program and you're a student, you have to learn to be more comfortable with like ambiguity and the fact that it's not going to be set in stone. And at the end of the day, the only thing that's important is if your students come away with like the point, like with the objectives. And you can get there any number of ways, and it's becoming more comfortable with flexibility. And what's great about curriculum is it's like your map, it's your guide, and you use that and you shift it and it changes, but it's really just a guide. It's not this absolute verbatim thing that has to be followed. And the painful, not painful, but kind of painful lesson you learn when you're writing curriculum is like it's never done. It's never finished. There's never like this period on the sentence. Like it flows and it goes and it evolves and it changes. And you try to get it the best you can and you deliver it and you work on it and you measure its effectiveness on how the students did reaching the outcomes you wanted, the objectives. But I mean, the best laid curriculum can still have issues and faults and problems. So it's, I think that's one thing that MAT students need to hear is like, it's never going to end, and not in like a negative way. It's just the curriculum keeps flowing and it keeps going. And especially now, like when I was a student a long, long time ago, like the vast majority of what students wanted to do when they graduate was pretty much be restaurant chefs and go out into the industry and tackle that. And now students have so many different career goals and end games that our curriculum has to match that. We have to evolve our curriculum with the wants and needs of how our students have evolved. um
I think that's accurate. That is totally accurate. And you mentioned that, yeah, you've been in the industry for 25 years. You were a student. We were all students. And you taught, and then you were in the industry, and now you're teaching again. And you touched on it just briefly there. But are there any other differences that you're seeing in education today versus, maybe 15 or 20 years ago when we were students? I know for me, some things are the same, but some things are vastly different from my student experiences. So I'm curious what you're seeing as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very cliche thing, but I definitely think our students have changed. I mean, it's as simple as taking notes. When I was a student, the expectation was everyone takes like copious handwritten notes, and that's gone away. I mean, I rarely, rarely see students take handwritten notes now. For me, it works, but for them, it doesn't. The students' expectations of their instructor, I think, has changed. I mean, after COVID and after the things that a lot of these students have been through previously in their personal lives and through education, it's a different world than when it was 20 years ago. And I think the instructor has to work with their students a lot and be flexible. I think we definitely have policies and rules that are great, but at the end of the day, we have to work with our students and we have to be able to reach them. If they have an issue, we have to be able to try to solve it. It can't be a hard line. No, this is the policy. The policy says XYZ. You want ABC. Can't do it. I think in order to really help them, we have to um, just be flexible, hear them out. Like they're all still, I mean, the students I have now are all still pretty much teenagers. And you have to be able to work with them. You have to be able to solve problems, and you have to remember what it was like to be that age and know that they don't necessarily have the life experience that maybe someone older does. And I mean, those are some of the biggest things I've seen and the differences between then and now.
So on the idea of flexibility, I mean, I feel like any teacher who hears that might make the jump to say, okay, I'm being more flexible, I'm listening to my students, the rigor in my classes is suffering, right? Or I'm not going to necessarily get the same output that I would, let's say, 20 years ago, where chefs are yelling, pans are flying. You know, it's very much, it is a professional work environment to almost like that. So, but I want to clarify because I think what we're talking about here is yes, listening is important, being empathetic is important. And I go back to a conversation we had a few months ago with Gabriel Key. He talked all about this, about how empathizing with your employees, and in this case students, matters, right? But you shouldn't be able to let go of what the students need to do. And one of the things that we see today in education, and Jamie, I know this is important to you, and Max, as much to you as well, is flexibility doesn't mean giving in. Flexibility means providing different routes for a student to get there, right? And for years, we have been told, there's one way to do this. Just like there's one way to write curriculum, which is bullshit. There's not one way to do it, right? There's multiple ways to make even something as classic as a hollandaise, right? I'm not saying you make it with a blender because it maybe isn't authentic, but there's a way to do it with multiple vehicles. Is what you're talking about in terms of flexibility, the idea of giving students the necessary prior knowledge and base understanding, but then providing flexibility in the way that they achieve that goal?
Yeah, I mean it's a case by case basis. So a prime example of this today is in my class today was a hollandaise practical day.
Oh,
So
perfect.
that means that the students were to be assessed on their ability to make hollandaise. So I know that every student in my class has theoretically made hollandaise in classes prior to mine, and this isn't the first time they've seen it. So I had a student today that I witnessed have a lot more help make their sauce. They really didn't make it independently. And the expectation was like, you make this independently and you present it so we can evaluate how you did it. So the student came up and I said, look, I saw you make it, but you had the help of like two of your classmates. And I want to see how you make it. I don't want to see how they made it. And the student told me, Chef, I never made hollandaise before. And I was like, I'm curious about that because I know for a fact that you had it in another course. And they said, I was absent all of those days, chef. And I said, okay, well, it's super unfair of me to assess you on something you never done. So what we need to do is make sure that you do this in class like a few times before we test you. Is that fair? And the student said, yes, chef, that's fair. Um, I think in another time, we might say 0. Like, you didn't do it, that's a 0. I saw you, you cheated, you had the help of 2 of your classmates, that's a 0. I don't think it's going soft. I don't think it's lowering the expectation, but I think it's getting an understanding of like a case by case basis.
No, for sure. And like also just think about this, like that opportunity or that one student that you saw, like there could be another student that you just didn't see that is also struggling. So maybe that one student then prompts you to kind of do an ad hoc hollandaise demo. And the student that was sort of flying under the radar, just not in your viewer sight at the moment, they're benefiting from that too. Or even the student that is pretty confident with hollandaise sees another way to do it, and that adds to their competency, making them a stronger cook. So I think that one example is so powerful because yeah, on the surface you're touching one student, but in reality you're probably impacting multiple students' experience. And like that's the real deal stuff right there.
Yeah, I mean, you always try to hear them out and you don't want to just say no. I mean, if someone is uncomfortable, ultimately the student came to culinary school to learn all these fundamentals and these techniques. And it's such a basic fundamental technique that instead of just giving them a zero and shutting them up and sending them on their way and moving on with our day and our life, it's like I want to make sure they get it. I want to make sure they get this basic technique. And like you said, if one student is having that issue, there's a strong chance that like another student, if not several others, are having it. Um, and it all comes back to hearing them out, basically. And I mean, we talk about how students have evolved and changed, and I think the students now we deal with do need that support, and they do need that additional help, and we need to make sure they're getting it.
You mentioned a little while ago about when you were a student, you were taking copious handwritten notes. And today, students can take notes in all various forms on their phones through videos. And we see technology being used in the kitchen. It's not going away. We have AI and things are advancing. Our students are changing. The world is changing. Where do you see culinary education going?
It's hard to say. Honestly, I wish I could give you this like hard pressed answer, but I don't know because honestly, I never saw it coming to where it is now.
Just yeah, true.
So, I mean, to see where it's going, I'm not sure. I think there'll be more tech, honestly, just because everyday life has more tech. Um, I'm worried we're going to become dependent on like I don't think people are memorizing recipes like they used to. I don't think
Hmm.
they're memorizing techniques like they used to. And I think they're going to become addicted to referencing things, which, I mean, who doesn't constantly referencing things? But I think it's going to go farther than I'd like to see. Um, I get frustrated when I put a time tested recipe or ratio on the board and everybody practiced it. And I'm like, who liked that? And they're like, everybody. Great. Awesome. Who wrote it down? Nobody. And I'm like, how are you ever going to make this again?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, I'm just going to look it up. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's no. I'm like, you got to just know some of the stuff. You just got to know. You just got to memorize it.
But that also comes in time, right? Because I feel like back to your like initial thought, and we got to land this plane soon. But back to that your initial point that you mentioned, they're 18, 19, they're kids, right? I
True.
mean, people in their early 20s now are still kids. They're not necessarily getting thrown into the lion's den like they were 20 years ago. And that's both good and bad, right? But what I think is important is, and this is something I do, so you can tell me if it's something you do as well. But I use those moments to kind of politely remind students that at some point in their life, they're going to be in a situation where they can't reference it, right? High stress on the line if they choose to work in a restaurant. And being able to understand or pull out of the stratosphere how to cook jasmine rice or how to hard boil an egg without referencing. These are sort of fundamental tasks that I see what you're saying. People are looking up recipes for, let's say, boiling an egg. I think that that's okay, so long as we're using our stage to inform a student that at some point they gotta lock that in because they won't have the time. And you know this more than anyone else that like, as you go through your career and get older, like, there's just no time.
Now, I think you bring up a good point, and I think that kind of goes back to the training versus the education. I think if we were training someone, it'd be like, you should know this. Like, we're past the point of like you not knowing this. You have to know it. And as with education, I think it's that more subtle, like you need to begin to memorize this stuff. You need to begin to really lock it in. Um, I just like to it's the students have evolved. Today in class, I asked, how many of you are in the industry right now? I mean, when I speak to them, they all say they want to be chefs. They all want to go and conquer the food world, but none of them have started yet. Uh, I mean, 20 years ago, if you're in culinary school, there's a pretty 95% chance you were a line cook as well. None of my students are line cooks, and I'm encouraging them. Like, the education is very, very important, but so is that real world experience.
Yeah.
And you need to go out there and begin to acquire it because it's full circle.
Yeah. It brings me back to the Danny Meyer quote, which I think, yes, it's from industry, but it has a place in education, is like that constant gentle pressure thing. It's just a continuously nudging. And I think that's where the mentorship thing comes in, and being able to connect with your students, not only on the stuff that's in the classroom, but also on a slight personal level. Obviously not taking it too far, but being able to just consistently nudge them matters.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. At the end of the day, we're here to help them and we're here to encourage them. And like, yes, I get a little frustrated that none of them have joined the industry yet, but it's like they still have a million miles to go, and they still, I mean, just keep digging at it. And that's why you're here, is to learn. And maybe you haven't started yet, but it's you have the time, and just begin your process.
Yeah, and I think what you said earlier is nothing's going to replace experience. And at the end of the day, what you learn, you have to apply in a real life setting, and that's where your learning's all going to come together.
Absolutely.
Well, we want to thank you so much for taking this time to chat all things culinary education with us. And are you on social media? Can people find you anywhere on the
Yeah.
internet?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Absolutely. I'm there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much.
What's your
And
handle, Max? What's your handle so people can know where to find you? I guess they want to stalk you.
Max S. Manning.
Max S. Manning. Listen, it's always
Yep.
fun to talk education with like-minded people, people that truly are shepherds of the next generation. And Max, again, we got you now, so now you're part of the crew. So you can't go anywhere. You signed in blood. So
I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much for letting me chat with you guys today. It was a blast.
all right, we'll see you soon.
All right.